Give me a sec. All right, everybody. This is our first session with our experts, and tonight we are meeting with Alice Aycock. And Alice is an outstanding sculptor and drawer, and I've known Alice at least a while. Back when I had a gal who I'm trying to think. We worked together in the early 80s, so it's been a few months. Alice, welcome to the Klein-Artist-Works discussion group. Thanks so much for being with us tonight. I think it's great to have you here. You have a fabulous, long, wonderful track record. How did you grew up in Pennsylvania, right?
Yes, I did. I grew up near Harrisburg, which is, you know, not so far from Philadelphia.
And did you know you were an artist when you were a kid? Were you were you infected with this disease already?
Well, let's see. I knew very young, as somebody said recently, that I wanted to make a difference. I wanted to do something. I knew that. I probably knew when I was very, very, very young that I wanted to be creative, and meaning somehow take whatever was out there and try to make sense of it. And I was both. Let's just say that I'm stuttering here. I've told some of these stories so many times I get tired of telling them. But what you have to realize is that in that period of time, and even now, you're in school and you tell the teacher, I just want to do art. It doesn't really sound too good, okay? And so I basically, I was a reader, and I wanted to do very well academically almost from the outset, from first grade or something. And art was then, and still probably is, somewhat debased in school, and it's not really worked into the curriculum in any really serious way, except maybe in very elite private schools. And certainly, hello?
Yep, we're all good.
Oh, okay. So I was a closet artist. Let's just put it like that. And I didn't tell people that I made art, and I was rather ashamed of it. And I also wanted to be a writer because I was a big reader. So, and I could tell lots of stories that I've told many times before. And in fact, there's a video out right now on the internet at Bomb, if you look at Alice Aycock Bomb, and you can hear the story of me and my dad when I was a little girl. So I don't want to tell that one again. But when I got to college, I was majoring in English, and I was going to be a writer. And I took in my sophomore year, I took a class that was 3 hours of studio and 3 hours of art history. And I had a marvelous teacher who gave us things like John Cage and just a lot of really interesting reading. And I was able to put together the fact that making something and thinking could be combined, and that art could be about ideas as well as some kind of craft with your, and so at that point, I think really, when I walked into class, he had Picasso's Woman in the Mirror, I'll never forget it, up on the screen. I thought to myself, what is this? This is stupid. And then he began to talk about Cubism and how it related to the period and how it related to Einstein's theory of relativity and simultaneity and Freud and Joyce and all of these things. When I walked out of the class, I changed my major. So that's a different story than the one I tell, and so I really decided to kind of let go and sort of come out of the closet my sophomore year in college.
Where was that?
That was at Douglas, which was the women's division of Rutgers. And to further that story, it was about 45, it still is, 45 minutes from New York City. And there were back then artists didn't make a lot of money, so they taught. And there were a lot of very exciting artists, many of them Fluxus artists, teaching at Rutgers because New York was still the center of the art world, and they could teach and have their studios in New York. And Roy Lichtenstein had been there the year before, and Robert Morris had been there a year before, and so it was a really exciting place. I would say it got a lot of information from New York City, which was the center at that point of the art world, and I was immediately thrown into a situation which would have been comparable to sort of studying physics at Stanford or something like that, studying art probably at the best possible place I could study art at that point in time.
How did you did you immediately transition from, you went to graduate school though too, did you do that right away?
Then I went to graduate school, and I left, when I left Douglas, Rutgers, I was mentored by the teachers, I think, because it was clear that once I made the switch, I did it completely and totally. And it was clear that I was, you know, driven and obsessed, and they suggested that I go to, I think SVA was mentioned, but Hunter, because once again, Hunter, which was the City University of New York, had the ability to attract some of the most cutting-edge artists and art historians of the time. So I got to study with the creme de la creme in art history and contemporary art, art history, and studio art. So people whose names are now legendary were teaching there at that point in time.
Were you was it mostly a male class? I mean, there weren't a whole lot of female sculptors at the time you came out.
Well, the interesting thing is that when I was at Douglas, it was the women's division of Rutgers.
Right.
So the teachers, also the graduate department was at Douglas for some, I mean, it was just all fortuitous and lucky, really. So it was a very small department. There were maybe, I don't know, 18 graduate students. And I got to hang out with them, and they were serious, very serious, and so I immediately saw what serious artists could be like, people who decided to, you know, really devote their life to art, and as an undergraduate, and actually Jackie Windsor, there were 2 or 3 female graduate students at the time, Jackie Windsor being one of them in sculpture, Keith Saunier being a male, but he was there, and Jackie was somewhat of a role model for me. And then when I left and went to Hunter, I mean, there's usually a lot of women in art school. It's just that the men are the ones that get the galleries and get famous. So there were a lot of women in graduate school, but the real players were mostly the men.
How did you get attention? How did you start making a difference?
When did I get attention? Well, I stayed 3 years in graduate school, and during that time, I want to say that in keeping with my academic pretensions, I was the curator of the slide library at Hunter. So I spent a lot of time with the art historians, and I looked at a lot of art, a lot of historical art, and a lot of books. So I was still mainlining, let's say, ideas and art the whole time. And I decided to stay an extra year. I was really studying with Bob Morris. He went on sabbatical. And I studied with Tony Smith while he was on sabbatical, and when Bob came back, I extended my studies so I could write a master's thesis with him, and which was on the highway system. and I can talk a little bit about that in a minute if you like. And there were a few galleries in New York, not like what there are now. I mean, now there are 1,000 galleries probably. Then there might have been 50, and maybe only 5 to 10 that would show real contemporary cutting-edge art, one of which was Leo Castelli. And Bob showed at Leo's, and we all wanted to be at Leo's. And I remember Bob, hoping that Bob would say, Alice, you're really something else. I'm going to talk to Leo and, you know, get you a big show. And instead he said, there's a group of young artists at a place called 112 Greene Street. Gordon Matta, who I think he was Gordon Matta then, not Gordon Matta-Clark, is sort of running this thing down there, and why don't you go down and talk to these people and see if you can work with them. So I did, and it turned out to be one of the most experimental, exciting places. Soho was not Soho. There was one gallery, I think it was Paula Cooper, and 112 Greene, which was an artist-run co-op. And Phil Glass played there. Richard Serra did work there. I think Rauschenberg sort of supported it. Gordon Matta, Jean Heistein, a whole bunch of people. Susan Rothenberg showed her paintings there. George Trackus did some of his breakthrough sculpture there. I went there and started showing my work, and that was the beginning. So that worked pretty well for you. I mean, and then you started having decent exposure pretty much immediately. Well, I mean, I came to the city in '68. I went to graduate school through '71. I started showing here and there. It was a very small art world. It's not like it is now. It was a small art world. There were a few critics that you knew you wanted to know. There were a few artists. They all hung out at Max's Kansas City. So if you wanted, there are a few artists that you wanted to meet, like Robert Smithson, for instance. So you knew where to go to find them. There were certain bars where these artists were. But the so-called cutting-edge avant-garde was very small. And you knew where these people were. And you would, if you wanted it, you would put yourself in somewhere where you could meet them. And it was the backdrop, what you have to realize, the late 60s, early 70s, there was the anti-war movement. There was the women's movement. There was, you know, there were the civil rights movement. There was a lot of things in the air, and we were just coming off all of that excitement and that energy. And New York was in debt. People were fleeing the city. Families were fleeing the city, but for entrepreneurial young people who wanted to be where the action was, New York was a really exciting, cheap, wonderful place to be. So you could say that it happened quickly, but I don't know, 68 to 75, slowly. I was in an important show in 75, and then 77. It was 10 years to get to Documenta. It wasn't that fast. You know, things happen fast, and then they can go, I mean, I can say a lot in a little bit, but you can have your big wham-bam thing, and then it can all stop. It can all get slow again. I mean, a lot of people experience, they come here, they get their shows, and then what? Then it's another person who has their show. And the art world is very fickle, and it's a very tough, and New York is a very tough place.
So do you feel like you were the popular thing that was going on in the mid-70s, and then it? Do I feel what? That you were it. You were you know, the it girl or the it sculptor for a period of time, and that you had a lot of successes, and then it sort of disappeared, changed.
Well, what I would say, I don't know if I was the it girl because there were a lot of it girls, but what happened is you maintain a career. I don't know that it changed. I mean, in other words, you keep working, and I kept, if you look at the bio, you will see there were lots of shows, there was a retrospect, you know, there was lots of things. I kept working and making lots and lots of work. But is everybody still there, or are we gone?
No, we're all good.
Oh, okay. You know, I've made, I don't know how many pieces, but it's just that you don't always get the press, that's all. But it isn't like I then started doing, I think in the 90s, the 80s I was still, I showed with John Weber every 2 years. I don't know, in the 90s I started doing these big public pieces all over the place. So I think what people have to realize is if you're in this, you're in it for the long haul. And you're not always, you know, you're not always getting the limelight, but that doesn't mean you're not working, that doesn't mean you're not doing shows, that doesn't mean you're not, you know, I mean, I don't know how many public pieces all over America. So I was getting these big commissions. I just wasn't showing in a gallery in New York. After 2000, I think, when John Weber went out of business, I think things became more quiet that way. But having a career in art, it's the long haul. That's all. Or else you stop and I don't know what you do, but I don't know. All I know is I just continued till now.
I'm not convinced that many people choose to stop. You know, sometimes, I mean, I can think of other people, but so
yeah.
Do you have mixed feelings about the number of large-scale commissions you did? Do you think you should have spent some energy working on galleries? It sounds that there's some reluctance on your part.
Reluctance about, no, I think you're about the large-scale commissions?
Oh, no, or that you didn't get as much attention from the press as you would have if you mixed galleries.
No. I mean, I was really talking, no, I wouldn't say that. You're putting words in my mouth. I wouldn't say that at all.
All right.
I'm really talking about what it's like to be a young artist today, how hard it is, and that you get your one show and you think you're the greatest, and then somebody else comes and fills your place. No, I don't have any. I don't have a lot of misgivings about what I've done. I mean, I'm going to be really honest with you, Paul. I took the opportunities as they came. I had ambitions to build very large-scale things, and I did, like architectural ambitions, and I did that, and I have no regrets or no misgivings or no thinking that I should have done this or should have done that. I think I did exactly what I was meant to do.
How many galleries
and it's
do you
all
think?
Okay. It's all good.
How many galleries do you think you should have?
Well, right now I think I have 4 or 5 actually. So I can't.
Is that the right number?
I can't keep it. Is that the right number?
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know. I mean, I don't think you can, being an artist, much to people's dismay probably, is not like, there isn't a, you know, you teach these courses in school about how to. It's not like being an accountant or going to business school or any of those things. You kind of make up your life as you go along. I mean, and I think even people who are successful in other fields will tell you that you invent as you go along, and the field is always changing. And I don't think that if you stay in one place, that's probably the worst possible thing you can do. and expect that everything is going to stay. You have to constantly be sort of fluid and on your toes. And I don't know how many are the right number of galleries to have. I could never answer that question.
Let's talk about public commissions for a minute. What was the scenario by which these happened? Would you compete, or would people come to you and go, Alice, we want this piece?
Both, a combo. But I would say, on the whole, probably more people coming to me, or knowing that they would like my work, ahead of time. And
doing a public commission, you have more responsibilities than you do making a sculpture for a gallery, right?
Well, it's a lot more complicated because you're, in a gallery, it just goes up for a couple weeks and then it comes down and goes into storage.
I want to talk about the responsibilities you would take on for doing commissioned artwork.
Well, now when I work, as opposed to when we were together, and for the longest time I had young architects in my studio who at one point were drafting for me, and then sometime in the early 90s when architects were beginning to employ computer drafters, and I began to also have young people coming out of architecture school who were very adept at computer drafting, and so I have those types of people in my studio. And let's say we have a commission. Let's say we have a commission on the East River of New York City. And we would get the drawings for that site, very precise drawings, and we would get very precise photographs of that site. And then using the site and whatever the existing situation is, let's say it's a structure of a building the cladding has been taken off that building, and it's just the roof structure, and it's a kind of skeleton structure. And I think about, and it's on the East River. I'm taking an actual project that I did.
Okay.
And so we have all the dimensions of the building. We have that in the computer. We have absolutely everything to scale in the computer. And then I start to think about, it's surrounded by bridges and highways, and it was a heliport, and, and the energy of New York City. And then I begin to loosely play with ideas that I might Photoshop diagrams and things like that onto this structure and onto the skyline of New York City. And then gradually I will fine that down and work and play with the scale and play with the ideas. And then once I get something that I think is what I want, then I would give that series of computer renderings, drawings, etc., to an engineer who would then look at, and probably by then I would have some pretty good idea of what I want the truss, because I design a truss, and I would pretty much know what I want that truss to look like in terms of pipe sizes, and I'd know the material, but still I would pass, it goes loops up in the air, 50 feet in the air, and loops through, and where is it best connected to the existing structure, and so you give it to an engineer. And in this case, it was an engineer by the name of Thornton Tomasetti, and they design skyscrapers all over the world, the tallest skyscrapers in the world, I think they designed. Anyway, so they look at it, and they're sympathetic. They like art. This is kind of nickel dime to them, even if it's a couple 100 feet long and a couple 100 feet in the air. I mean, that's nothing for them. So they look at it, and then they use a computer program, and they understand wind loads and snow loads and 140-mile-an-hour hurricane strength winds, and they tell me, well, the pipe should be this diameter, and the weld should be full penetration welds, and it should attach like this, and on and on and on. And then we go back and we go to the fabricator, and he bids on it. We give him drawings.
This is all your responsibility, and these are all your hires or outsourcing?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
Absolutely. And that's how it goes. And eventually, and we get prices and estimates, and eventually those drawings are signed and stamped, and we go build them, and then we truck something across, the George Washington Bridge in certain hours, and get bunches of cranes, and maybe we have 4 or 5 cranes on the site, and put it up, take some pictures, and go home.
Let's talk about the money part. In basics, I mean, how much does Alice get? How much do the fabricators get? How much is the cost of materials?
The fabricator gets the bulk of the budget, always. And in cases like this, maybe I get, it depends. I try to get what a contractor would get, 15 or 20%. And sometimes I get more, and sometimes I get less. But the fabricator gets the bulk of the money.
How many projects might you have ongoing at a given moment? Do you ever have more than one?
Oh, sure. Usually I have things I'm proposing, things that are in engineering stage, and things that are being fabricated all at the same time. And they could be all different places.
Is there a different mindset that you have when you're doing public sculpture and private sculpture, for lack of a better term, stuff for galleries? Stuff I usually call...
No, because, it just depends on the size. If something's 6 feet tall, you don't need to take it to Thornton Tomasetti to engineer it, but if it's 27 feet tall, you do, or you have to take it, So the mindset, I'll tell you something, there's the difference between, there's bad public art and there's good public art. There's bad gallery art, and there's sure plenty of it. And there's good gallery art. The difference is that public art is sort of denigrated because a dealer can't make money on it. That's the only difference. Right now, you have a lot of artists who are making very, very literal pieces all over America so the public will get it and enjoy it. And you have a lot of very high-profile artists making very, very obvious sculpture, very literal, that the art-buying public can get and enjoy. And both of them are coming at the same thing from the same ends. You have, what's the difference between a big bear that's sitting outside, in some park, and a big bunch of boobs sitting in a gallery somewhere, balloon boobs? Not much. It's just one can jack up the prices and everybody makes a lot of money, and the other is in the middle of who knows where, and nobody's getting any money. That's the only difference, as far as I can see.
How far ahead do you plot what's going on in your career?
I have always had enormous ambitions from the time I was very little to make a mark, to do something, to invent something, I'm very competitive, and to be, I had huge appetite from the time I was a teeny little girl to be somebody. That has never changed. It's the drive. It's just this drive I have. Do I plot out everything? I say I have a 5-year plan. Maybe it's a 2-year plan. But it's not like, it's not the same as in the way that you're sort of trying to say, I'm not a wheeler dealer. The art comes first, the ideas come first. The integrity of what I'm trying to invent always precedes everything else. I may be stupid, but that's the way it is.
Yeah, that doesn't apply. You're not stupid. So don't you feel like you've succeeded on all these counts, and you still have the ambitions?
I still have the ambition. We're doing this big project on Park Avenue, which we're building right now, and sending them all over the place before they get to Park Avenue, and working Part of it's being built in Fort Lauderdale, part of it's being built in Jacksonville, Florida, part of it's being built in Greenpoint, part of it's being built in LA. You know, we'll see. We'll see. I mean, you know, we'll see.
When's that get installed?
That's going to be installed at the end of February, the beginning of March of 2014. And it's on the website. So if you direct people to the website, the last part of it
Which website?
Park Avenue. Alice Aycock. Just have them Google Alice Aycock in the website.
I'll pull it up while you talk. So
yeah.
talk to us a moment about how that happened, this commission, and the scale. Did you push for the size? Did they give you the size? I'm interested in...
Well, I'm used to making proposals all the time, so I was invited to make a proposal, and I did. And if you see it, if people pull it up on the website,
I'll get it right now. I'll show it right now.
Then it was really, and you have to keep going into sculpture installations, and then the very bottom is Park Avenue paper chase. And so it was really, you know, I would say a theme and an idea about a kind of tumultuous wind movement that created the pieces and dropped them all along Park Avenue. And this is what is under construction now. And just a small segment of that, that's 70 feet long. And so I proposed it. It was accepted, but then it was up to me to find investors, and we're building all different sizes right now. But the big size is the actual pieces that are on Park Avenue are under construction, but we're also making additions, smaller size additions of the pieces. And some of those may be on the website too. Anyway, there's 6 structures that go up the avenue. I think you're stuck in one of them, and that's the print that we made to, you know, help fund the series of pieces. So
all right, what do the investors get? Do they get a return on their money? They get art.
Sure. They get a return on their money. Yeah, we sell the pieces, and they get their money and more back and more.
So how many? You got 6 large-scale pieces, right?
Mhm.
And they break down into more elements, or we're going to sell 6 pieces, or we're going to sell more than 6?
Well, we're selling small versions already of these pieces.
Okay.
And I would say the first piece that is on the very beginning, that piece breaks down into, let's see, where was it? It was right at the very beginning. Keep going, back. That one. Go to the next, to the right, move to the right. Okay. That one is 70 feet long, but it breaks into 3 sections. So in that case, actually, one can sell parts of the piece. The other pieces are pretty much freestanding. The last piece at the very end looks very tall. That is going to outside of London. That one. That's under construction right now, and it's going to be sea freighted and air freighted to Chatsworth, which is Sotheby's Sculpture Park, and it will open there in September, and then it will return to Park Avenue.
That's cool. And how long will this be on exhibit on Park Avenue?
It'll be from the beginning of March through July, I think, something like that.
What's the most exciting moment in a project like this?
Well, some of the exciting moment is when you're designing them and you can actually see them come into being, like we're showing you right here. This is the level that we're working now, where we actually, you can make these things feel like they exist there. When I first see that coming up on the computer and these things get resolved, it's very exciting. It's like that moment of the creative process. And then then you look at that and you get accustomed to that. And then I was just out at the shop in Greenpoint this morning, and I'm seeing parts of one of the pieces come together for real, and you're standing there next to these things with your, physically with your body, and you really sense the scale and the dynamism and the excitement. And I would say that first piece that you showed is going to be, it's very complicated to make. These pieces are intersecting each other in all different ways, slicing into each other in all different ways. It's very complex. And to be honest with you, I don't think anybody's ever done it. I really don't. I don't think anything like that, and when you're really standing there looking at that thing, not that one, but the first one, I don't think anyone's ever made anything like that. It's really complex, and it's really pretty neat.
Isn't that a lot of the pleasure?
If somebody has, I'd like to see it. I think Naum Gabot and some of those very early Russian constructivists did some really wonderful things, but not on this scale and not to this degree of complexity. And maybe, somebody like Gary is doing some very complicated, huge, huge architectural pieces, but the amount of intersections and complexity in this thing is pretty neat, pretty amazing. And I don't usually talk like that about stuff I do.
True.
But,
isn't this a lot of fun fabricators have, though? I mean, don't they enjoy the challenge of working with artists and doing things that they wouldn't do normally?
Yeah, we all do. Let's just say it has always been, from the time you knew me and we had that crew in Chicago, I have always had people who are artists themselves or, who are excited by the idea, and they will do it for that, because they want to see. It's a challenge and they want to see. And I think if I've ever been lucky and had an ace in the hole, I've had wonderful, exciting people who have been tremendously loyal and gifted and who come along on this ride with me. I've been really lucky that way.
They would probably say the same thing about you. It doesn't usually work unilaterally. So cool. All right, let's take some questions from some folks. Let me stop the sharing because it's easier that way. This is cool. I can't wait to see this. All right. Who's got, I bet you can't either. Who's got questions? Somebody want to raise their hands or unmute themselves and ask Alice a question? Pamela, go ahead.
Oh, hi, Alice.
Hi.
The last work that we looked at is really beautiful. It's so fresh and contemporary. The only person that comes to mind for me is Tony Craig, but I like your work much better. That piece, anyway.
Yeah, well, he's sort of still carving and forming and molding. And he is somebody I think of too, and whose work I've seen a lot of, and I agree. And there are other people, by the way, besides him who are doing these kinds of things. I'm just saying that the complexity of that is it is when you really, it doesn't look so complex even in the renderings, but when I was out there looking at it today, I went, oh my God,
Oh, it does. It really, they're amazing. I have a really simple question, which is, when you're starting the process and coming up with these shapes, what is the first material that you're using? Are you drawing or using paper or doing it all on the computer? I'm just curious how it starts.
Right now, we're doing it all on the computer. In the old days, I would do paper or, first draw, on graph paper and get these shapes, and then take museum board and twist it, or bend plexiglass or something like that, heat it or bend metal. But now the first place is the computer, and then sometimes small-scale models or 3D printers.
Okay.
3D printers are really also really marvelous, and
That's
we're using those because there it's a one-to-one. You have the drawing, you have the computer drawing, and it goes straight to the machine and it makes it. So there's on Park Avenue, there's something that looks like a series of drapery. That's all going to be made in fiberglass, and we've made a number of 3D prints of that.
Okay. Do you feel like the fact that you started out using, before the computer stuff, that informed your ability to be able to just go straight to the computer now instead of physically building a model?
That was a little hard to hear, that I started out doing what?
Oh, do you think that the fact that you started out using materials before the computer stuff informs your ability to now just go straight to computer?
I think that starting out drawing like the way an architect would draw, which is the way I started out, very much plan and elevation and then 3D'ing it, in conjunction with getting to build things, getting to find out the truth. I built so many early pieces that were destroyed or were just sort of mocked up, but in plywood or whatever, that I got to both dream them up and then go build them. And a lot of times when you're studying architecture, you don't actually get to build, so you don't really know what the materials are going to do. So right from the outset, I was able to draw something and then prove it by building it. So it was that combo. But the way I drew originally was just segued seamlessly into the computer programs because they were designed for architects, and I was drawing the way architects draw.
So. Oh, thank you.
Are you drawing much on yourself, Alice, on the computer?
I have a lot of assistants, and then we print things, and then I draw on top of that or over that. But I would say that it's been years that I've had people in the studio drawing for me or with me or whatever. So, but the big drawing show, the retrospective, I don't know that there are a lot of drawings out there now on the website too. So you get to see what the drawings look like.
Cool. Sabine, go ahead.
I'm calling from Germany. I just saw the beautiful sculptures that you're starting to build now. What really impresses me is that in this kind of really heavy material, you are constructing something so airy and light, and it must be fabulous to stand beside it in all its beauty. My question is quite another one, though. You, as a female artist, having started out such a long time ago, how was it to be a female within, although you have this drive and ambition and everything like that, within this very male-controlled environment? How did you deal with that?
Are you in Berlin by any chance? Because I have, if you are in Berlin, my main gallery is actually in Berlin, Thomas Schulte. But at any rate, so you could see some real stuff there. Well, this is what and I was just again looking at this video that's just come out. Someone did a video interview with me, and these questions come up. And what I say is that that it's kind of like it was the whole world was dominated by men. Forget whether there were women getting to do art. Women weren't getting to do anything. They weren't getting to be doctors. They weren't getting to be lawyers. They weren't getting to be anything except maybe mothers and teachers. So my generation was breaking through all those barriers, not just in art, but, you could finally, and I guess that I was extremely lucky because I had a role model. I had a grandmother who had taught her sons, math, who was the with the intellect of the family. So I had this incredible role model in this woman, this grandmother, and I had a mother who raised me like a boy in the sense that she didn't want me to, she wanted me to be somebody. And I grew up with a father who competed, raised me to be very competitive, and I don't know what he thought I was going to do. I can't imagine what was in his head exactly, but you know, it was like as I said in this video, when I was very young, I thought, my God, the only people that did anything were men. And then I forgot it, because if you kept thinking that way, you wouldn't get out of bed. So I just wouldn't see it. It was just like you have tunnel vision, and you just get up and you say, I want to do this thing, and I'm just going to do it. And of course, even today, you walk into a room, you're a small blonde woman. Do you think you command the respect that Richard Serra does when he walks into the room and honkers around and tells people to fuck off? And no. But if you keep thinking that people aren't going to pay attention, you just don't think that way. You just think about what you need to do, what your next idea is, what you've got to get done. Otherwise, you wouldn't get anything done. And now there are so many women doing such extraordinary things. And, to some degree, it was my generation. I'm 66 years old. It was my generation who just pushed through. But of course you'd get a lot of crap thrown your way. Look at Hillary Clinton, how much she's got to take. Her husband screws around on her, she's this, that, and the other, and she still keeps doing it. So what else, it's just the way it is. We were not raised to be victims. We were not raised to sit around and say why we can't do something. You just do it.
Thank you. Okay, I'm glad you, perfect. All right, 3.
So I'm going to hang up. Can I hang up now?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. No,
That I've blown off my...
3, go ahead.
Hey. Hi, Alice. Thanks for being here. I love your work. I love the big sculptures, obviously. My question was, I was just looking around on your website, and I saw a bunch of drawings you've done. I love those, too, because they kind of remind me of some of the work I do also. But one set seemed to be just drawings with pen and ink and color fields, and then there was another that was drawings based on digital print. Can you tell me more about those two different series?
Well, the digital prints, what was happening for years was we would make things, maybe, in the studio I'd have 3 or 4 people, I'd be telling them what to draw. They'd be drawing by hand. Then we would Xerox those things, paste them up together to make huge drawings of all different parts, and then trace it. And then use graph paper, and then redraw on top of that. So at a certain point, the last big drawing is called rock, paper, scissors, I think. That was just traced by hand from many different parts. And then what I started to do, I got hold of these huge printers, and there's beautiful archival paper. And so the same lines that may have been traced over and over with, rulers and templates and all these things, because nothing was just freehand, it was all done with rulers and templates, and now is digitally printed. The lines are digitally printed, but then everything is hand colored by me.
Okay.
So, so it isn't really all that different from what I used to do. Sometimes I would have 10 people tracing over something, and then I would come in and paint it. So it's not that different. It's just like using the digital printer, which can print now 60 inches wide, which is pretty neat.
Yeah.
So,
are you making these more for your galleries, for your gallerists, or what's the...
I made them all. I've always made them. And am I making them to sell? Actually, we're selling the sculpture right now better than we're selling the drawings. But the drawings are a parallel practice, and they're really important to me because it's my world and my brain, and not, I don't have to, you know, struggle in the same way to build them. It's just my world in the studio, my fantasy. So, but what I would say about all of these questions is right now the market. If I had started out, or any of my contemporaries had started out thinking, we've got to make something to sell, none of the great stuff would have happened. Again, you have to say, what do I want to do? What do I want to make? What am I thinking about? What's bugging me? What questions do I have? Not, what can I make to sell? I think that's the wrong way to think, because you just then end up making these little knickknacks.
Alice, how do art fairs affect that equation? It seems to me like art fairs encourage artists to make smaller stuff and not work in series so much. And I'm not sure if that's a great influence. Art fairs,
but I am showing a lot of work in art fairs now. But what I'm basically saying, and we're selling, and we have to, but what I guess I'm saying is, don't put the cart before the horse. Put what you need to do and what you're thinking about first, and then everything will fall into place. Don't make art for the market, because if you do, you're not going to do any, you know, there's a lot of crappy stuff being sold right now. That are made, you know, there's just so much crap out there that being sold, and that you know, that's better in Walmart maybe.
Lisa, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I had a question. If you could give us some advice for mid-career, late 40s, something female artists, how to compete in this art world today. It's just so competitive now. Like, there's a lot of mediocrity out there and just a lot of junk. How do you make your mark anymore in this world?
Well, you have to get somewhere where there are people who will support you and know what you're doing and believe in you. And, you know, I mean, this notion of, at this moment, of being off somewhere, sort of protecting yourself and not really, you know, you have to put yourself someplace where somebody's going to find you, and then it has to be people who, you know, are intelligent and interested in you know, not just any old art dealer or any old collector or something. I mean, it's always going to be, you know, there are many different levels of art, but you have to be somewhere where it's happening, that's for sure, you know. I have a lot of friends who started out in New York and then went off to wherever they went to, and you know, and that doesn't work out so well, I don't think. You have to be where the action is, where people are going to see it. And otherwise, I don't know what to say. I mean, there's the internet, there's putting stuff out on the internet. Sometimes there's wonderful things that people are doing that you just discover and see and then you connect up with. But I mean, I think art does happen in a network of where it's being shown, and where people will see it who care about it in a, you know, in a significant way.
Thank you both. I think Christine had a question. Go ahead, Christine.
Okay.
Hi. Yeah, my question was, you talked about when you were finding investors and your proposal for this Park Avenue piece or pieces, and I was curious, was there like a public art call for art, or was that something that you came up with and you proposed it to someone? And like, how did that, what was the beginning, the initiation of that space for your artwork?
Well, I mean, Park Avenue Malls is a place where sculpture is shown, has been shown, I think, for 20 years. So it's a changing, you know, venue, but it's been a venue for showing work for, I think, approximately 20 years. There's a committee, and it was just that they asked who might be interested in making a proposal, and I was suggested, and then I made the proposal. But, you know, these things don't happen overnight. We started talking about me coming to New York in 1968, and, you know, I've been working I'm 66 years old. You know, the reason these things are happening isn't because I just happen over, you know, I have a lot of credibility at this point. So how does that happen? Well, you keep working, and you keep showing up, and you keep making your proposals, and you keep getting them in front of people. So it isn't just, you know, until people believe that you're somebody who's going to come through. But it isn't, you know, it's step by step by step by step, building one thing on another until you have, you know, such a portfolio of ideas and work that that things can happen. It doesn't happen overnight.
Two more. The investors, you talked about finding investors. Is that something that, like you said, the 3D printer, so you make your maquette, and then do you invite people to dinner? Do you know, like, how do you get that out there? Do you already have a list of people that you work with? You know, I'm just curious.
Well, there are a list of people, but then, you know, I have other people who know people who bring people into it. Okay. So, again, you know, there's stuff like Kickstarter and things. Do you know about Kickstarter? Yeah. I didn't use it, but, I mean, but again, you know, there's applying for things, applying for grants, applying for commissions, and building up a portfolio of experience and work and connections over years.
So who did you use in Jacksonville? Just curious.
What?
Fabricator.
Oh, it's a fiberglass fabricator that is going to build one of the pieces in Jacksonville. Yeah.
Oh, just curious.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Cool. Does anybody else have other questions? We could wrap this up too if we want. I see other hands.
9:04. I haven't had dinner yet.
Yeah. I just have a short question, which really interests me.
Go ahead.
Okay, it's me again, Sabina.
Yes.
Alice, I'm very interested in the concept behind your work, the idea, the philosophy. Where does that come from? Do you understand what I mean?
I do, and it came out of minimal art. You know, it came out of the theoretical issues that were happening in the late 60s and the early 70s, earth art, minimal art, process art, and then I began to add in my own, you know, but it comes from what you assimilate as you enter. And at that particular point in time, there wasn't the kind of many different competing ideas. There was, you know, sort of abstract expressionism, pop art, minimal art. Things were more linear. So, but really and truly, I would say the discourse today, which I am not a part of, is really pop art. And, but to talk about the theory, it would take a long time.
Okay. I stopped hearing Alice. Did her phone go dead? It might have. Well, we got the best out of her. Alice, did we lose you?
She looks like she's calling us back.
Maybe. I don't know if you'll look over here. Is she trying to call back?
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Maybe we'll see her throw it on the ground. Alice, you trying to come back? Okay. We'll see.
No, she didn't get through.
All right, well, we could be done. I think we're done. All right. Give her one more shot. Let's see.
So I think my phone just went out, and that's probably a sign that maybe it's time to say goodbye.
All right, Alice, why don't we do that?
Yes.
Hold on a second. Let me unmute everybody, and we can all together thank you for joining us. I appreciate all, and we're all going to come visit you next February and March and see what's going on. Thank you.
That's fabulous.
Very
You
much.
too. All right, bye. Good luck to everybody. Good luck. Bye. Bye.